So if you find different types of rhymes, then you will be awesome all the time. And
Wow.
that's no lie, because I'm so hot. I shoot the three like I'm Channing Frye. I don't know.
Hi everyone, welcome to the next episode of Outspoken 101 podcast. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Bolo.
Okay, okay, for context.
Should I continue that?
For context, this is the third time that we're filming this. And like for some reason it gets increasingly worse the more that we do it. So like last episode, I said, okay, we need to work on the intro some more because okay, should I introduce you or should you introduce yourself? And then the second time, and this is not what we're releasing, but the second time we did this, we were saying it at the same time, and that was weird. Now this time it was also weird because there's like this long weird pause between I'm Kyle and I'm Bolo. So you know what? Fine, I don't care. For the
All good.
memes, so you can see that we have the same outfit as the last episode because we are filming this back to back because we feel like we owe it to everyone to tire ourselves out for the podcast. But yeah, today what we're gonna talk about is just weird things that we do for training. We did a little bit of this when we talked about mafia and werewolf. So we were like, how about our next episode? Ooh, episode. I'm not gonna edit that out, whatever. Each one of us has a list of 5 things that we do for training that does not seem to be debate related or it's just generally weird. And we don't know what each of us has on the list because we didn't talk about it beforehand. Honestly, I said this is the third time we're doing this, but this is the first time we're getting past the intro. So yeah, we still don't know what's in each other's lists. So yeah, Bola, how about you start this? What's your idea number one for weird training?
All right, awesome. So my idea number one for weird training is if you are the more experienced debater in your organization, one thing that you could consider doing is to have younger people coach you. And the reason why that's weird is because younger people who have less experience may not know how to coach you. But when I tried it back in college, where there was a newbie debater, and I said, okay, I'm going to give a speech and you're going to give me feedback as if you're my coach. That was weird because, like, number one, she didn't feel that she had the authority to give me feedback. But even if I also felt the same way, I felt that was super useful. That would really help me improve as a debater. Because one thing that I've noticed after like my second year of debating is that a lot of judges are also newbie judges. They're what a lot of dinosaurs call fresh meat judges, where like they're easily intimidated, they're very impressionistic. So when I have younger people coach me, that's when I really understand that even if my setup is correct or even if my debate speech is slightly above average or above average, there are certain things that I really need to work on such that the lay individual could understand and grasp it. And that's why I find it super useful, even if it's weird, because that just gives me a unique insight in terms of how do I make my debate speeches more engaging, fun to listen to, and more accessible. So yeah, if you have more experience or if you have a coach, maybe just try to find certain avenues for the younger people to coach you, and that might give you some advantages and better insight in terms of how to public speak and how to debate. How about you, Kyle? What's your number one on the list?
Yeah, but before that, what I would like to ask is like, how do you go about doing that? How do you go like, hey kid, they want to coach me without sounding creepy? That sounds really weird. I was like, I am 25 years old. You are a high schooler. Please coach me. Like, how do you?
Yeah, no, yeah, the way I'd go about it is I prepared a 7 minute speech and I'm looking for feedback in terms of how to make it better. And I'd always give a disclaimer. Don't worry, I won't take everything that you have to say to heart. So don't worry about being wrong with your feedback, because even if there are people who have less experience than you, there are certain areas where they come from where they could just really give an insight how you could be better. So for example, if they have ADHD, maybe they could also give insight in terms of how you can become more engaging and how you can become more attention worthy. So that's weird but also super useful.
So I'll go with my first one. And I encourage you to play this game with me throughout the entire episode, okay? The first weird training idea I have is lie, as in tell the opposite of the truth. So last time I said I don't like lying. But one of the exceptions is let's test out your ability to create stories that sound believable, and
Mm.
let's test the listener's ability to call out BS. I learned this from my family. What used to happen was I would ask a question and then my father would give me an answer. And sometimes the answer doesn't make sense. So we've eventually pushed each other to I call it out and then next time he makes it more believable and I do the same. So now it's just a commonplace practice in our house where we just like, hey, do you know the story behind why they're called forks? That's because when they started fishing, the original fork was actually a trident, right? Like three pronged trident. But they created a fourth one, a fourth prong, and we called it a fork because if it's just like this, it doesn't have enough area to actually like pierce into the meat that you're trying to eat. It doesn't have as much holding power. So that's the reason why we created the fourth prong. That's why we have a fork now. We've evolved past tridents. That's why tridents are no longer used. You would hear stuff like that, just like at a lunchtime or dinner table, like completely made it up. And it's on everyone else on the table to go like, I think you're making that up. And like at some point, it's just like everyone is doubting what everyone is saying. So yeah, one of the reasons why I do this is, like I mentioned, it trains you to make connections, and create new stories out of it. And it also trains the other person to poke holes in that story. If you come at it from, you're always skeptical about things, about the stories that people tell you, I feel like you are able to get more out of the things that you consume on the internet, for example. Don't trust everything just because of who said it or because the internet says it. It's maybe someone just made it up. Yes, and do that all the time. Sometimes it's so funny, like they don't get it. They never get it, even though it's so outlandish. So one of the things that I like to talk about was the origin of my name. And there was this entire batch of new members in the debate organization. And I convinced all of them that I got my middle name from like rebels during the Spanish colonial period, where a village moved out and went to the mountains and they were starving and they were about to die until they found a shrine to the Virgin Mary. And then there was a bunch of food there, and that saved them. And that's the reason why my middle name, Montevirgen, means Mountain of the Virgin, because when they went to the mountains, they were saved by the Virgin Mary. And the entire batch bought into it. And I had to tell them, by the way, that was full of crap.
Poo poo.
Another thing I convinced them to believe is that I was a big music producer. And you know me, like between the two of us, you are the musically inclined person. You have a band. I don't know anything. The only chord I know how to play is E minor because it's literally just two fingers, right? And I convinced an entire group of people that I made this song called Momai. Do you know that song, Momai? By
And I'm aware of that because one of our common friends, shout outs to you, told me that, oh my God, Bolo, you're not gonna believe this. Kyle is the producer. Oh my.
Momai.
And then I Googled it up and I was like, Thea, oops, this is not true.
Yeah, it was so
And I
freaking.
sent her a screenshot and it's okay, now I see. Now I understand why you do that.
Yeah. So it's not because I'm a compulsive liar. So if you're going to try to do this, what you need to do is to create an environment where it's okay to say, okay, I think you're making this up. Haha, I see the joke. And you should never actively do it to fool another person. And if they are fooled, you need to tell them. Ideally, immediately, because my mistake was I never dispelled the notion that I was a music producer because I was so convincing. I was like, doom, doom, like I did all of the layers of that track. I was like, yeah, I made all of that. It was so hilarious. They
Yeah.
were like, oh
So
wow.
for context for the Gen Zs there, during the our time as millennials, every time we'd go to a computer shop, like that song would be playing. It wouldn't be like an original Filipino computer shop if that song wasn't playing.
Yeah.
Context.
If you don't hear shotgun, shotgun, the Buddha, are you even in a computer shop, right?
Yeah.
Are you even playing Dota? Are you even using Piso time? Like,
Pisonet.
yeah, are you even doing that? Yeah. So that's number one for me. It's just like the most effective way to do it is start from a place of truth. So it also tests out the matter that you have. So the closer one part is to the truth, it's easier for you to make the connections towards predicting what could an alternate future for this truth would look like. Ayun. Many reasons. I promise I'm not just doing it to mess with people.
That's awesome. So now I want to share what's second on my list when it comes to the weird things that people could do for debate training. And it's pushing yourself to place catchy rhymes or puns in your speech. So, for example, it's a debate about Russia annexing Crimea. So, this was around like 2015, 2016. And one of the debaters that I talked to about puns said that her last line in her speech was Crimea River. And for me, like that was so smart because Crimea River. And I just think that if you have a pun that is memorable, that also just helps you remember the entire debate as well. But also sometimes debate becomes too technical to the point where it just gets so bland and boring and it's about racking up points. But when you try to take a look at finding ways to incorporate rhymes in your speech, then that's where you also get to practice getting attention, being a performer. And I think that the more you become a performer, the more that you're able to serve other people with your public speaking outside the debate community. So if you find different types of rhymes, then you will be awesome all the time. And
Wow.
that's no lie, because I'm so hot. I shoot the three like I'm Channing Frye. I don't know.
That reminds me of a story where a mutual friend of ours talked to me about a debate final that they watched where Prime Minister freestyled their entire speech. And then I was like, wow, was it good? And they were like, no, they got fourth. But I was like, okay, what happened in the debate? I actually don't remember. They said I don't remember. But the only thing that they remember was that oh, this guy freestyled their entire PM. So yeah,
But that's impressive. That's totally impressive. They're willing to take the fourth for the sake
of the
of
memes.
challenging what debate is, right? And what it could
Yeah.
be. And yeah, I just want to give a fun fact about that person. I forgot his name, but I met him when I judged in Malaysia. And that person also has a flip top video against Protege, like one of the English conference
Oh
Filipino rap
dang.
battlists. Yeah, and he said to me that when he looks back at it, it was very bigoted and misogynist,
Flip top
and
usually is. Yeah.
it usually is. And you just told me it's hip hop is a reflection of the people of today, and yeah, that's how he just chose to participate in it. But yeah, mad respect to that person. You know who you are, because like, hey, incorporating hip hop to debate is awesome because rap battle is essentially debate.
Yeah, that's why in Respeto, right? There were rap battles, but there were also like references to Balagtas, which is like a more dramatic and Filipino version of debate just from back then, right? Yeah, I totally get it. What I would say though is just like on the topic of flip top, because I'm such a big flip top fan. Like
Same.
I remember memorizing Team LA versus Team SS, right? Like
Mm.
Looney Abra and Shea Smugglers. Like that was peak. But even looking back, like that did not age well. There are so many like homophobic jokes, misogynist jokes,
Classism.
yeah, classism as well, and it's so difficult to reconcile. Like it's still funny to me. It's still very impressive to me, but like I, this is not cool. So it's difficult for me to go back to watching that stuff because of this tension. But I remember the feeling from before where I was like, this is the bee's knees, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, actually, just on flip top is that the new flip top battle MCs also acknowledges that, and they also create a counterculture. towards
Oh.
it. So, for example, there's this guy who's young named Zend Luke. He would say, "I'm gonna do this freestyle of this battle rap without any insults," and then he won the rap battle with zero
Oh.
insults, which is like unheard of. So there's also like rebuttals towards the past misogynist comments that they would throw out, and some of those rebuttals are just so crisp. So in terms of my appreciation of it, is that if hip hop is a reflection of the culture of today, it's also demonstrating how the culture is being challenged and how it's evolved. And it's just an acknowledgement that change and being more progressive takes time, but there are efforts in that culture of hip hop when hip hop is really also about challenging status quo and trying to change something. Yeah, but we digress.
But what I would say is, even if you're not like a freestyle rapper, even if you're not super good at rhyming, maybe another thing that you can do is just maybe you can throw in like lyrics in your speech, right? There was this one speech I did very recently where I said, okay, my intro and my outro will both be lyrics to High School Musical songs. But at some point, I was like, why stop at the intro and outro? Why can't I introduce and conclude every single argument that I have with High School Musical lyrics? And then I proceed to stare at my paper and think of like, how can I make an argument that's based on a High School Musical lyric? Like it wasn't even let's make the argument first and then think of a High School Musical lyric later that fits. I was like, no, let's start from the lyric and then let's make the argument surrounding that. But yeah, the second item on my list is overanalyze the media that you consume. Overanalyze it. And the more pretentious that you analyze it, the better. Like, it's not enough for you to watch My Little Pony Friendship is Magic because there are like 8 seasons of that, 8 or 9, right? And it's a really good show. It's not enough to just watch it. You need to make like a matter primer or like textbook on like how subversive it is for like something like this to exist. So I remember there are so many ways that you can look at. I'm gonna talk about My Little Pony again. Again, because this isn't the first time. There are so many interesting things about that show that demonstrate a lot with regard to fandom, with regard to creativity. The sincerity of the show was what brought people of all ages in it. So that's where I got the idea of when you are making debate intros or whenever you have language in your speech that you feel like is flowery, lean into it. Don't cut down on it. Lean into it. Because if you're sincere, that is the antidote to cringe. Like a lot of people go, I don't want to be too flowery. I want to, but I know that I shouldn't because it might be cringe. But if you lean into it and you're very sincere, like what Milo Pony did with the idea of friendship, then like sincerity truly is the antidote to cringe. In the latter half of the series where the fandom was more active in creating like characters and plot lines and the creators actually took that into account. That's why there are so many Easter eggs from the community within canon. This was just part of fan fiction before, and now it's a real thing. DJ Pony was just some person who made like dubstep from like My Little Pony assets, and they were immortalized in an episode where they were the star. So I made several papers about precisely My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. And I did that every time I was very into a show or a movie or a game that I played. Right now, and just for fun, just for fun. So when I played Fire Emblem Three Houses, I used it as a jumping off point to think more about how conflict is handled internationally and the idea of peace process and the idea of how can you get people with their own selfish, not necessarily selfish, but valid concerns, and they all have an incentive not to share information with others, even though sharing that information and coming to an understanding might prevent the conflict. How can we deal with those things? How can we have something called confidence building measures to address that? When I was in fourth year of law school, I had the opportunity to take up a class on peace process. And the professor like actually handled peace talks with like terror groups and stuff like that and in other countries. When they talked about this concept of confidence building measures and how it was applied and used in the Russo Japanese War, I was like, whoa, this is exactly what I was thinking when I was playing Fire Emblem. So that's the second tip that I have, which is just overanalyze the media that you consume, because that can be a good jumping off point for future areas of discussion, future areas of study, like different arguments that you might be able to have and create in the future. Yeah, that's my second tip.
So I just want to add to that. One of the things that like also would help other people if they binge watch stuff on Netflix is to try to create an argument why the protagonist is actually the villain and why the villain is actually the protagonist. And the reason why that's just useful is because in debate tournaments, you'll also have to portray a protagonist as a villain. So, like for example, like in Inside Out, right? Like the protagonist may be happiness, but if you think critically, happiness could be the villain there when culture, like maybe in American society or like in society in general, would not acknowledge the sadness that is in there.
Yeah.
So maybe like those are certain, and then you can find structures as to why happiness is actually the villain rather than the protagonist in that story. Another thing is like watching Marvel movies like Captain America, right? Because you could see Captain America, someone who's a virtuous guy that just genuinely wants to help the poor and protect people. But if we were to think of Captain America as a villain, Captain America wouldn't change. It's really just the front of the military industrial complex as to why certain wars are justified, and Captain America provides a symbol of a shield to shield the perspective that
Oh,
America is a warmongerer and it has different types of weapons in its arsenal. And the more you get to think critically of those particular films in terms of just like asking, why is this protagonist a villain? Then therefore it's just easier to create arguments as to, for example, there's a debate as to why, like, is Mother Teresa's a feminist icon? Or should Mother Teresa be celebrated by feminism? And then with just that practice, like, I could think of arguments as to why, like, Mother Teresa just like really enforces that patriarchal structure. Mother Teresa like glorifies suffering, especially like the suffering of the poor, and profits and gains a brand from it. So yeah, this is your debate muscles into thinking of arguments and different perspectives.
yeah, that's true. So, what's your third item on your list of weird training ideas?
All right. So another weird training idea, which is also like a life training, is what I call rejection fishing.
Uh
So
huh.
what does that mean? So the goal for with the activity of like rejection fishing is to get rejected as many times as you can in order for you to improve and grow and to have a healthy relationship with rejection. So what does that look like? So for me during the pandemic, it was me asking out people on an online date, my crushes, and tell them that I really like them and I find them beautiful and I find them smart. And yeah, just knowing that they are out of my league and getting rejected for that. Another thing that I've tried before is asking for a free meal at McDonald's. And the weird thing is that when I asked the person in line if they could like pay for my meal, is that they said yes. In terms of rejection fishing, is that it really just empowers you to feel the rejection, just to try and execute and be accustomed to failure. But it also gives you an insight that sometimes your weird requests, people would say yes to it. And the more you're willing to become rejected, the closer you get to getting that yes from people. So, for my experience, is that out of the 7 crushes that I asked out on an online date, one said yes, and that was pretty dope. That was pretty awesome. Yeah, it's weird because it's super uncomfortable just to make requests out of people that you'd get a no to. But if you get accustomed to getting the no's, then you're getting closer to the yeses that will change your life in the future.
Yeah, I think that's good as long as you don't get creepy about it. Like, yeah, obviously, like that shouldn't Like that's something that goes without saying, right? But I feel like it's prudent that we always like remind people, don't be creepy, don't be bad, don't be a dick. Think about equity, just be a good
Mm.
person in general. Yeah.
Yeah, so like with rejection fishing, it's really about giving an invitation. And all invitations, they aren't coercion or even persuasion. It's just giving the individual to accept or decline that invitation. So, yeah,
Yeah.
do it in the context of an invitation.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. My third item on the list is improv debating. So like we have this idea of it's all impromptu, right? We have 15 minutes. But impromptu isn't really improv because improv is someone gives you a prompt and then you immediately have to respond to it and make it interesting. So before we had this idea of ninja debating where someone just makes you stand up and gives you a motion and then you have to debate it without prep time, like zero prep time. And that was valid, and I still think that it could be effective. The issue with ninja debating is that it can be very anxiety inducing. So we need to temper that down. But I still think that improv debating could be good. When I say it's anxiety inducing, one of the ways to remedy that is to remove the sense of seriousness that the practice might have. Because in debating, you have this idea of this is a serious conversation we're having. This is a serious thing. And that's what's making it anxiety inducing for people. So maybe if you're going to try this out, have them debate something weird, eliminate all vanilla ice cream or something like that. Yeah. And have fun with it. Make other people continue the speech. Another way to do it is have someone start an argument and then mid sentence cut them and then have another person continue it and then stop them and then you continue it, but throw in a curveball where you like tangent so far off and then you make someone else continue it. So yeah, just make it fun for people because I really think that it helps like making you think on your feet, being more accustomed to like weird ideas, building off of weird ideas that you might initially reject at first, but you might see some merit into it once you start actually like debating and arguing for it. So just like to expand the horizons that you have. And also make you a more entertaining speaker, I think. If you can make jokes out of stuff like that, it makes you like a more compelling speaker for me because it's more attention grabbing when you're able to make jokes or when you're able to make like an emotional appeal out of ice cream as opposed to just here are 10 structural reasons why the vanilla ice cream is not good actually. Yeah, so like mix up the like ice creams, you should be able to mix up the way that you train. Yon, my third item.
Yeah, that's awesome. There are also motions that I like when, for example, like a Christmas motion, like this house celebrates Santa Claus or like regrets Santa Claus. So it's a motion, but it also just allows you to think critically about what does Santa Claus represent, right? Like, oh, capitalist America that was designed by Coca-Cola to feed children this idea that parents should be giving them gifts and all that stuff. So yeah, that's I like that. Like I'm really all for weird motions. Because like they just really push you to become better debaters when it comes
Yeah.
to like more serious motions.
What I was saying was you can have silly motions or you can have silly arguments. And like the improv there is I will give you the silly motion and you have to argue on it. But maybe another thing that you can do is you can push each other to have increasingly weirder motions and then debate it. So when you said this house celebrates Santa Claus, I'm thinking, okay, what if it was an actor motion? Like this house as Santa would abandon Christmas. And then maybe after that, someone could think, oh, okay, but Santa was not actually created by Coca Cola. Santa is an offshoot of Norse mythology because the original idea there was would fly in the night sky during the winter solstice and look for bad children to punish them. And the reason why he has eight reindeer, Santa has eight reindeer. The ninth reindeer, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, yun yung invention by an American department store. The reason why there were eight reindeer was
Mm,
because Odin's mount, the horse that he rode on, is an eight-legged horse named Sleipnir. And then it just turned into eight different reindeer. But yeah, maybe the motion could be this house as Santa Claus would return to being Odin or Wotan in the older
mm,
language. So you can have fun with it. Like, how can you
mm,
push this motion to be even sillier? And then, like, how would we debate it? Like, how would you go? Yeah,
yeah.
as Santa Claus, my interest is to beat up children. Yeah, no, because like before it was cool, right? If you're a naughty kid, you get cool. But the reason why it's cool is because he will burn your house to the ground. No, I'm kidding. I don't know. But yeah, maybe that's another way that you can explore it. That's my third item. Let's move on. What's the fourth item on your list?
All right. Okay. So I call this the curveball, but essentially during training, especially if I'm the one that's leading the training, I could call the shots on this, is that there is 3 minutes left in prep, and then I ask the teams, switch sides.
Oh no.
Switch sides. I call this the simulating the worst case scenario. Why is that so? Because in debate tournaments, especially if you're still new, this common mistake will happen to you, which is you misunderstood the motion or you wrote down the wrong side. So you thought you were debating op, and then while the first speaker speaking, and then I don't know, you're closing government, like you realize, oh no, like we prepared the wrong arguments. Like how are we gonna adjust? So this is one of the training methods where if that thing happens in training, but then you still survived, you know that in a debate tournament, if that thing happens to you could also adjust because you've already simulated that type of problem. It's also like a creativity exercise in terms of how are you going to use the material that you already wrote down for the other side and use it against them. And sometimes that's also like a huge blessing for you because you're able to preempt your opponents at a deeper level. And then when you're a whip or a deputy, like you already have plotted out the landscape in terms of how the debate could go. So this is, I don't know what to name it, but it's just the simulating the worst case scenario of preparing for the wrong side. Have you ever prepped for the wrong side?
Of course, yeah. But
Yeah.
speaking of worst case scenario, the worst case scenario that I have right now is if people don't go to the Outspoken Spring Semester tournament because that is such an important thing for our outspoken scholars. Like it's such an important opportunity for them. They're very young and they come from like underprivileged institutions with no formal coaching. And usually they can't afford to go to tournaments every now and then. Don't even have that much of opportunities to train. So we wanted to create this tournament with your support, hopefully, you, the audience, to help us support these young debaters because a lot of them want to be advocates. A lot of them want to develop their own local debate communities. And we are just in support of that, full stop. And we're never going to stop advertising it, no matter like, even if it's a curveball, we need to prepare for these kinds of things. But anyway,
Good one.
wait,
That's a good one.
okay, yeah, but that has happened to me 100%. I think maybe we can take it further, just change the motion on them, just change the motion on them. But they need to be informed beforehand that this is something that might happen over the course of your session.
Mm,
Because if it is like completely out of left field, they might not understand the reasoning behind this. But again, one of the reasons why I wanted to push it further and say maybe just change the motion. Forget about the sides, change the motion. Because in the 1990s, in the grand finals of Worlds, the motion was this house believes that Machiavelli was right. And Machiavelli is the, if you don't know in the audience, like Machiavelli is the person who said the ends justify the means. So opening opposition was like expecting everyone to debate, okay, do the ends always justify the means? Is this like a big philosophy debate that we're going to have? But Prime Minister said, okay, we have the right to define the motion. And as long as it is still debatable, you cannot challenge it. Even if it's so far from the spirit of the motion, if it's still debatable, you have to debate it. So they said, okay, the motion is Machiavelli was right. Machiavelli said the ends justify the means. So today we're going to be talking about why we should negotiate with terrorists. And so opening opposition basically took everything they had, everything they prepped, crumpled it, and threw it on the ground and debated the new motion, the new topic, and won. They won based on that. Like just the courage to start over from scratch, the idea that, okay, fine, this is the worst case scenario, but under the rules that are prevailing at this time, we still have to debate this weird definition. So I'm not sure like what people would do if that were to happen today, right? Like I'm not sure what the rules are. No, I know intuitively what the rules are, right? The rules are the same. That even if the definition isn't something that you agree with, as long as it's debatable, you have to debate it. Maybe you can expand it, expand the debate, but you still have to debate the thing, right? So unless it's super undebatable, you still have to do it. Maybe if that happens today, it'll be just a messy debate in general because people will be like, no, but the debate is this. The debate, no, the debate is this. The debate is this. Yeah. So I appreciate that at least in the 1990s, people went like, you know what? Screw it, let's do this. Let's throw out everything that we have in the most important like debate speech we've ever given in our lives and let's win it anyway. So yeah, even during the worst case scenarios, there's still a way for you to win. There's still to get a way to get the W. So I think that's a good point for you to have. Yeah, which leads you to my fourth item, which is exaggeration training. Exaggeration training is when you like consciously make an effort to create emotional exaggerations whenever you're making an argument, because there's a tendency for people to go, okay, I understand this intellectually, but for people who are not debaters, that is not really going to be super that's not really going to be super convincing or compelling. So you need to be able to train yourself to pepper your language with more descriptive words or more vivid imagery, or just the idea of like it's more emotionally resonant. If we are going to have a conversation about a certain thing, so for example, let's have a prompt. Let's talk about AI, which we did for the second episode. And you said, you can say, okay, pick whatever side, and I will take the opposite, whatever it is that you say. I'll take the exact opposite side and I'll make it like super intense on my end. Like, how dare you? Can you imagine how life would be like if everyone could be replaced by computers? Stuff like that. So, the reason why this is training is it pushes you out of your comfort zone. If you always just, okay, this is the first thing that comes into my head, let me say it. So here you are also trained to think about the way that you're going to say a certain idea. And you need to be very particular about your wording, and you need to have a more diverse vocabulary or a deeper vocabulary. Essentially, you're training yourself to use more words more frequently so that they become like a mainstay in your vernacular, right? So another thing is just like get in touch with your emotions. Train yourself to make more emotionally resonant content. Train yourself to make more emotionally resonant speeches that people will remember even after the debate is over, even after the tournament concludes, right? So, ayun, exaggeration training for me. How about you?
That's awesome. And yeah, I resonate with that because sometimes us as debaters, we think we are presenting a argument with emotion, but then like when you watch a recording of your debate, like I sound bland. But if you exaggerate certain emotions or put emotional emphasis on a particular phrase, then sometimes it just like really meet in the middle, and it's just like the perfect balance. So like when I'm super scared, but then I try to exaggerate an emotion like Snow White didn't like bit the apple and thought the apple was the poison, but in fact the poison is not the apple, but it's this thought that or whatever, right? But like trying to dramatize something, especially when it's a high pressure situation, will make you seem just more of a performer or like a or a speaker, and it will balance it out because some people might think mine's too emotional, but actually one of the common things that I see for a lot of debaters is that there's not enough emotion to drive home that point for the lay audience. So yeah, totally super resonate with that. And I think I could like try that out for certain things that I haven't been trying out. That was me trying it out. Okay, so the fifth thing on my list is silent eye contact. So, for obvious reasons, this is weird because when there's awkward silence, our tendency as debaters or public speakers is to open up a new conversation to break the awkward silence. But one of the things that I found useful in terms of just getting accustomed to discomfort is to not say anything and create and initiate eye contact with the person that I'm talking to. And before I say why that's useful, I would just want to explain first like how you could do this as a newbie debater. So as a newbie debater, you should remember that when you're giving a speech, like a prime minister speech, you have every right to stay at the podium for 7 minutes. So when you provide a speech and you did not manage to hit the 7 minute mark, like you're on your fourth minute or fifth minute, and then you have nothing to say, one of my invitations is for you to just stand there and then look at the judges in the eye. And what that just trains individuals at is being accustomed to discomfort, being accustomed to that awkward silence. And being accustomed with awkward silence really just empowers you to become self-expressed in times where there will be awkward silence, there will be awkward moments. But if you can be the person that like initiates eye contact and you get used to it, the awkward silences that you usually would feel would become less awkward because you have initiated these types of things. And eye contact is also super important for some judges or for audiences and listeners. So if you have 1 minute to stay in the podium and then just initiate eye contact, that also just helps you become accustomed to the uncomfortable feelings that you might feel in tournaments or high pressure situations. So that's one of the weird things that I do because the more I initiate eye contact on those awkward moments, the more I feel that I am the confident person in that awkward moment. And that just builds me up every time I practice that awkward silence, eye contact. I feel more in control of the situation rather than the awkwardness being in control of me.
Yeah, that's a really good point. What I would say is to add to that, because I'm always for the idea of it's still performance when you're debating. And one of the reasons why a lot of people speak so fast in debating to the point where it's difficult to understand them, or they rely so much on verbal crutches, is they're so scared of uncomfortable silences. When in fact, you can just reframe the way that you see that. Instead of it being dead air, think of it as a dramatic pause, right? So if it is a dramatic pause, it is an opportunity for you to insert more of the performance in that space. One of my coaches before said that music is not really about what you hear, because if it's just like one long thing, it's just noise. But if it's something that has pauses in the middle, like rests or gaps between when an instrument plays and when it starts playing, that's when it becomes music. So it's just as much about the pauses in between as it is about the words that you say. So when you're making like dramatic pauses like that, it helps to first be comfortable with being uncomfortable, being relaxed in a state where you're not supposed to be relaxed, because it can make you master the instinct to speak out of your ass. And that leads me to my last item on the list. If you can't tell, I'm taking a lot from like theater, improv, stuff like that. And the fifth one is not an exception, because at the end of the day, I look at debate as the process of telling a story that tries to convince you of an argument. So I take a look at how other people tell their stories. And one of the things that I found when you're doing training as an actor is you get Shakespeare, you get a piece from Shakespeare, and then you put your own twist on it. there are an infinite way, sorry, there are an infinite number of ways to deliver a single monologue from Shakespeare. There are an infinite number of ways to do it. And each time you do it, you can insert more of yourself or more of like other influences in that performance. So maybe what you can also do is transcribe your speech and then do some karaoke thing with it. So that's what I'm gonna term this. It's karaoke debating. You get a transcript of a speech, print it out, and then think of ways to put your own spin on it. So instead of just like copying the exact same way that Bosso does their PM speech from 2016 World's Grand Final, which I know a bunch of debaters do all the time, and it's funny. It's always funny when they do that. But I'd invite you to consider maybe you can use this as an opportunity to learn how to be better than Bosso. Put your own spin on it, like in performing the thing, and get a feel of the nuances behind the way that you say certain words, give more pauses, give more emphasis to certain things that can dramatically change the way that a speech is received by an audience. And this doesn't have to stop with Bosso, it can also be with your own speeches. When I listen to some of my very much older speeches, I get the sense that it's not nice. It's not nice. Not because the things that I'm saying aren't nice, but because the way that I'm saying it could be better. Like people ask me like how do I become a very clear speaker? Like how do I train clarity in my speeches? And my main advice is be super particular about the words that you use. Think about all the different ways that you can say the exact same thing with less words or with more impactful words. So I started doing that. Like I looked at the notes that I had and I went like, okay, what would be a better way for me to word this one sentence, this one argument? And I keep delivering it over and over again until like, okay, for this kind of argument, this is the best way to go about it. And so like I keep the notebook with me with a final version of it. So when I need that argument in the future, I have a notebook and like the best way to explain this concept is right here. So I just reuse it. Yeah. So that's my fifth item. How about yours?
No, I think I gave my fifth item already, didn't
Oh
I?
crap, yeah.
Yeah.
Man, it's
No,
been a while.
no,
Okay.
no worries. Actually, we just hit the 30-second, 32-minute mark, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure.
Actually, you know what? Let me check. Because we promised to time it and I forgot. It's
Oh,
at 00.
okay. So how do we conclude this?
Yeah, this is where
So
this is
my
improv, this is us being uncomfortable. Yeah.
this is me initiating.
Got the assignment because I was also like, all right,
Yeah.
that's it for this episode.
So my
Okay.
conclusion is that embrace your craziness, your weirdness. Sometimes you have weird and crazy ideas. As long as there's an intent for you to get better, that weird, crazy idea will find a way to serve you. So don't be too shy to express yourself and to try out your weird ideas, as long as where you're coming from is a place of growth, a place of kindness, and a place of adventure. So that's my final message.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening to this one, whether you're watching it on Facebook or on YouTube or on Spotify or wherever else. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Peace.